Hello and welcome to what is not a lunch and learn because it is not lunch. Um, it is 6 p.m. CST, and so we are doing a PM lunch and learn. I guess it would be would that be? Like an early bird dinner? That's what we should have called it. It should have called it an early bird dinner. All right, so we are going to talk about the unwanted effects of reinforcement, punishment, and extinction today. Per the usual, if you have been to Collective or you've done the video bundles, you know, please don't steal our shit. We do work hard on this. So you can disseminate, but don't be a thief. Um, I'm in collective mode, so I almost said motivation of the day, but that is not it. All right, so here we go. We are first and foremost going to talk about the unwanted effects of reinforcement. And I just realized Liat made these pages and sent them to me, and there's not a T. There we go. All right, so first, we're going to talk about behavior contrast. Okay. So you have positive and negative behavior contrast. My heart is going to tell you don't overly stress positive and negative behavior contrast. You need to know what it is and what it creates. So when you're thinking about behavior contrast, you're thinking about the rate of responding in one setting goes in the opposite direction of the non-reinforced setting. So we are going to pretend these are balance beams, and our initial balance beam looks like this. So we have problem behavior in both settings. So let's say home and school. So when you're thinking about behavior contrast, we're thinking about an intervention is put into place. In this case, the intervention is reinforcement. So I put reinforcement in at school, and the behavior goes up at school, right? I want to see you use your words. And then problem behavior goes, well, words would go up at school. They wouldn't happen at home. So then we would have an increase in problem behavior at home, right? Because I'm reinforcing your words at home or at school, but not at home. So because we are reinforcing in one setting and we're not using it in the other setting, we're going to see an increase in the behavior we want to see with the reinforcement in whatever setting that is, a clinic, school, I'm going to say home, but you know what I mean? And then the problem behavior will increase in the opposite setting. So when you're thinking about positive behavior contrast, you're looking at the setting that it had the intervention. So with positive behavior contrast, hold on, I got to think about this because I don't ever want to teach this part because I don't feel like it's necessary. So when you're thinking about positive behavior contrast, we're looking in the non-intervention setting. So because it went down at work, here we are, it went down at work and went up at home, it's positive behavior contrast, which is then we look at negative negative behavior contrast. We had an intervention at home, reinforcement, right? If we're talking about working out and we're being reinforced and then we go on vacation, or Danielle's on summer break and has not really been to the gym. Okay, don't judge me. Okay, and your workout behavior decreases in your non-intervention setting. So it decreases, so it's going to be negative behavior contrast. But I'm going to tell you this part is just the most important part, and that you're looking at there's an intervention in one setting and not in the other, which causes the behavior to shift. All right. Now, when you're thinking about other unwanted effects, right? And why are we doing this? Because it's part of your ethics code and it's part of your test content outline. So you have to know these, and these are definitely great negation questions if they were going to ask you them. So relying on contrived reinforcers, right? So when we teach, right, we like to teach on a CRF, but we have to be intentional about transitioning that schedule to an intermittent schedule and working towards naturally occurring reinforcement, right? You're not always going to have a token board. You're always not going to have Skittles in your pocket. Okay, so relying on contrived reinforcers is an unwanted effect. Going into talking about Skittles and candy and cookies, right? That's a potential harmful reinforcer because you are giving foods of non-nutritional value as reinforcers, right? So if I'm giving you a Skittle every single time you're doing something, that's a lot of sugar and a lot of a not great food that you're eating. So you have to be mindful of that. And again, why we work towards naturally occurring reinforcement. When you're thinking about the effects of reinforcement can be temporary, you're probably like, well, what do you mean? Because, right, reinforcement is what increases the behavior that we see more in the future. What this is talking about is when there's too much of a good thing, right? So a lot of times what I hear is, this kid doesn't like this anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? Why don't they like it? Well, I gave it to them all day long for 2 weeks. Well, I wouldn't want it either. So when you're thinking about reinforcement can be temporary, it's because we have given them so much of the same thing, they're satiated. So it has no value to them. When I'm sure you will all come in contact with this, is that society thinks reinforcement is bribery, and it's not. Bribery happens before the behavior. Reinforcement happens after the behavior, right? And reinforcement, we're coming in contact with it as the contingency of I had to engage in this behavior to come in contact with the reinforcement. Bribery is what happens when I give you whatever ahead of time and tell you, now you have to do this for me. And that's not what we're doing. Now, will people feel that way? Yes. Is it our responsibility to clear that up? Yes, absolutely. One of the big ethical concerns with negative reinforcement is that the person has to be in an aversive state for that type of reinforcement to be effective. Well, if you have read your ethics book, which you should be, so if you have read this, you know what happened in Florida. Okay, they weren't letting people go to the bathroom. They weren't letting them eat. They were not letting them move, right? So because that person is in such an aversive state, they're willing to do whatever you ask them to do to get out of it. So you want to be really mindful with that about negative reinforcement, is that people, like, well, you're being bad, so I'm not going to let you go to the bathroom. And then the person has to go to the bathroom so bad, so they're willing to stop doing whatever they're doing to be able to gain access, right? So you're being mindful of that when you're thinking about negative reinforcement. So let's swipe it over to unwanted effects of punishment. Now, when you think about your unwanted effects of punishment, right? Punishment is used to decrease a behavior, but we have to be mindful of using a punisher, right? Because again, we also see behavior contrast. So if we punish in one setting and not in the other, we're going to see a decrease in that behavior in that setting and an increase in the behavior in the other. The effects of punishment may be temporary. Again, punishment doesn't teach anything, right? It's just decreasing a behavior. You can model the punishing behavior. So, right, let's say that you put a kid in timeout and then they go out to recess and then other little kids are like, you go to timeout. You've been bad. I've seen that. Sweet little kids. Okay, so you could be the punishing agent. Not the punishing agent. You can model punishment. You can also be the punishing agent. So you are the person delivering the punisher, which means you are going to become aversive, and the person that is receiving the punisher is not going to want to be around you, right? So that really puts a strain on that relationship. Punishment requires a lot of supervision. Why? Because the person delivering the punishment gets negative reinforcement. So you have to be so mindful with punishment if the person who keeps giving it is constantly making that thing that's very aversive go away. So they're going to continue to use it. And so that's why punishment requires a lot of supervision. And then again, you're preparing for emotional outbursts. So I'm going to be upset. I may cry. I may scream. I may have aggression, right? So I have to be mindful of that. If you are a parent and use punishment, it's negatively reinforcing. Well, we just talked about this. Okay, so that's a big one. You have to be really mindful of that. I would say if you potentially could see a question like that of the mom is punishing or the dad is punishing, and so they keep doing it for the sheer fact that it makes their kids stop. When you're thinking about punishment, right, it's the highest magnitude, the least intensity. And you're like, what does that mean? So highest magnitude, when we're thinking about it, is we're going to go to shock as a very simple answer. So I have a dog. I'm not going to use a shock collar, but if you did, I'm not going to shock him at a 10, right? Because eventually he's going to get used to the 10 and then the 10 doesn't work. And then where do we go from the 10? But I'm also not going to shock him at a 1 and then gradually increase it as he gets used to it. What I'm going to do is say, you know what, let's start at 4 or 5, right in the middle. So highest magnitude, least intense. So I'm going to start with a 5 that's going to decrease his behavior with the shock. So that's what you're thinking about. Same thing if you were doing timeout. I'm not going to put you in timeout for 10 minutes, right? I'm going to put you in timeout for maybe 3 minutes and then see if that makes a difference. All right. So now we have extinction and you have this beautiful graph. So when you're thinking about extinction, right, we have to be really mindful of your extinction-induced aggression and escape and avoidance behaviors, right? And those happen in this piece right here, right? So your extinction-induced aggression and your escape and avoidance behaviors happen in your extinction burst. So as the behavior increases in intensity and increases in magnitude, you can see more intense behaviors, right? Again, because we know extinction is what was previously reinforced is no longer being reinforced. So that person is making a really solid attempt to gain access to what they want. So you have to be really mindful of that. Then you also have your spontaneous recovery, right? So we have our resistance to extinction here. We put on our extinction procedure. So the behavior is trying to get it, and it's not. So then you have this extinction burst. And then once you have your extinction burst, right, the behavior goes down. Extinction occurs, but there are times it comes back up. This is spontaneous recovery. So this is something that does happen. It says just checking in. So when you're looking at spontaneous recovery, the behavior pops back up and is like, hey girl, just seeing how you're doing, right? Think about your ex that you haven't talked to in a minute. And then they're like, hey, this made me think of you. And you're like, ew, no thanks. And then you don't reinforce them. So that's what you're thinking about with spontaneous recovery. Then when you're thinking about resurgence, so resurgence is when a behavior is put on extinction while a different alternative behavior was differentially reinforced. The behavior comes back because the alternative behavior is no longer being reinforced. So this is when we say, okay, great, we're going to use a DRA, right? So a DRA is a behavior, alternative behavior, and then you have the problem behavior. And a DRA, both reinforcement and extinction happen at the same time. So when we say, okay, we're going to reinforce this alternative behavior and this problem behavior is going to be put on extinction, right? What sometimes happens is that once this alternative behavior gets going, the schedule of reinforcement starts to thin too quickly, and we're not doing a good job reinforcing our alternative behavior. So that behavior that was on extinction comes back because we're doing a poor job reinforcing our alternative behavior. So that's going to be resurgence. But when you're thinking about your unwanted effects, you're thinking about your extinction-induced aggression and escape and avoidance behavior. So the difference between resurgence and spontaneous recovery is that spontaneous recovery is happening for the sheer fact that you are no longer reinforcing this behavior at all. No interventions. You put in extinction. It has gone away. Goodbye. See you later. You've just so this is an example of number of text messages sent. So we'll do it this way. Your baseline is 15. Okay, you put in your extinction procedure because you're like, I'm not talking to this human being anymore because they're terrible. So their behavior persists right here, right? They're about 15, 17, maybe 18. Well, they're not getting any responses from you, so their behavior starts to increase. Then they send you 25, then they send you 30, then they send you 35, then they send you 45, well, what is that, 43? Then at the very tip top, they're sending you 50 text messages a day. You are not reinforcing that. So then the behavior is like, goodbye, goes away. You still have them on extinction. You're still not talking to that person. And then they kind of pop back up and they're like, hey, girl, just thinking about you. It's been a few months. This meme made me think about you and how wonderful you are. And then it goes away because you still don't reinforce it. So then resurgence is when you have an intervention in place, like a DRA, so functionally equivalent, and you have extinction happening at the same time. So that's going to be a DRA. That's the only one of those that has extinction and reinforcement happening at the same time because you're reinforcing an alternative behavior and the other problem behaviors on extinction. But resurgence happens when we don't do a good job reinforcing the alternative behavior and the behavior that was put on extinction comes back, resurges. So, all right. Now is the time for you guys to do some questions. Hopefully that cleared up your question. So here we go. I guess I could read them. Okay. Oops. Ms. Carlillo, a behavior analyst working in a middle school, designs a reinforcement system to increase on-task behavior for Elijah, a student with ADHD. She implements a token economy where Elijah earns points for every 5-minute interval he remains seated and focused. Over time, Elijah's on-task behavior improves dramatically. However, staff begin to report that Elijah becomes extremely distressed when the token system is not in place. During assemblies, or field trips, refuses to participate in activities that don't earn tokens, and starts interrupting other students to ensure that he is seen being on task. Additionally, several peers begin imitating Elijah's behavior in hopes of also receiving tokens. What is the most likely unintended effect of reinforcement that is occurring in this scenario? A, the reinforcement system has created a negative reinforcement contingency, reducing the target behavior when tokens are removed. B, Elijah has developed a behavior contrast due to inconsistent reinforcement schedules across settings. C, the system has led to rule-governed behavior that interferes with natural contingencies. And D, the use of external reinforcement has resulted in dependency and reduced generalization of desired behaviors. And you can send your answers to me or Jessica. So you just have to do the little drop down. Or no, it's at the top now. It's the 3 little dots at the top. All right, I'm going to swipe the page. All right, the answer here is going to be D. So the reason it's D is the use of external reinforcement has resulted in dependency and reduced generalization of the desired behavior. This scenario highlights a common unintended effect of reinforcement, which is dependency. While the token system initially increases Elijah's on-task behavior, if he relies on the external reinforcement has led to difficulty engaging in the same behavior across unreinforced contexts, which is assemblies and field trips. He refuses to participate in non-reinforced activities, and his distress when the system is unavailable indicates poor generalization and overdependence. So it's not A, because the reinforcement system has created negative reinforcement contingency, reducing the target behavior when tokens are removed. This is incorrect because the scenario involves positive reinforcement, not negative reinforcement, and nothing is being removed to increase behavior. It is not B, Elijah has developed behavior contrast due to inconsistent reinforcement schedules across settings, because behavior contrast refers to a change in the behavior in one setting due to reinforcement changes in the other. This is more about generalization failure, not contrast, right? So that's the key piece of that when you were looking at behavior contrast in the answer choice, because it says across settings. And so when you're thinking behavior contrast, right, it's either it's in one setting and not the other, not across multiple settings. And then C is incorrect. The system has led to rule-governed behavior that interferes with natural contingencies. This is incorrect because while some rule following may be happening, the main issue is the dependence on the programming reinforcement, not interference with natural contingencies due to rule. So this is when you're relying on contrived reinforcers, right? We have this token system with contrived reinforcers, and we're constantly using it, and we're not working to them to contact naturally occurring reinforcement. And so now he's like, well, I'm not going to do anything unless you give me a token. So, all right, here's your next one. Mr. Harris, a high school behavior analyst, implements a response cost system to reduce cell phone usage during instruction. Each time a student is caught using their phone, a participation point is removed. Over several weeks, phone use decreases, but staff notice a rise in student complaints, eye rolling, and sarcastic remarks. One student has begun skipping class altogether during periods with the response cost in place. Other teachers report students appear more anxious and less willing to answer questions during class discussion. What is most likely the unwanted effect of punishment occurring in this scenario? A, the punishment procedure has resulted in stimulus generalization, leading to decrease in behavior across settings. B, a response cost procedure has led to an increase in behavioral contrast. C, punishment has resulted in emotional responding and escape and avoidance behaviors. D, the students are engaging in extinction bursts due to reinforcement being withheld. All right, I'm going to give it just another second. Okay, the answer here is going to be C. You are all correct. So the correct answer is punishment has resulted in emotional responding and escape and avoidance behaviors. So punishment procedures, while often effective at reducing undesired behaviors, can carry significant unwanted side effects. In this scenario, Mr. Harris uses a response cost a form of punishment to decrease phone usage by removing participation points. While phone use decreases, the students begin displaying increased emotional response, complaints, and sarcasm, and one student starts avoiding the classroom altogether. These are classic indicators of punishment side effects, specifically emotional responding and escape and avoidance behaviors. The others are incorrect. So A is incorrect. Punishment procedures has resulted in stimulus generalization, leading to a decrease in behavior across settings. Stimulus generalization refers to behavior transferring across different stimuli or settings. Here, students are reacting negatively within the context, not generalizing decreased behavior elsewhere. It is not B, the response cost procedure has led to an increase in behavior contrast. Behavior contrast involves a change in behavior in one setting, another setting, due to reinforcement or punishment in the current one. This scenario describes emotional avoidance behaviors, not contrast between settings. D is incorrect. The students are engaging in extinction burst due to reinforcement being withheld. Extinction burst happens when extinction procedures are not punishment. Response cost is a form of punishment, not withholding reinforcement. All right, here is your last question. BCBA, Mrs. Wen implements extinction for Liam's attention-seeking screaming by instructing staff to withhold attention when the behavior occurs. Initially, the team is confident, but over the next few days, Liam's screaming increases in intensity and frequency. He begins banging on the walls, throwing objects. The substitute teacher, unaware of the plan, gives him attention during one episode. Now the screaming is even more severe and harder to predict. What is the most likely unwanted side effect of extinction occurring in this scenario? A, spontaneous recovery is making screaming worse. B, the intervention has led to an extinction burst and possible aggression. C, reinforcement is being delivered on a fixed interval, making behavior intermittent. And D, Liam has become satiated on attention and now is engaging in automatic reinforcement. All right. The answer here is going to be B. The intervention has led to an extinction burst and possible aggression. This scenario clearly illustrates a classic side effect of extinction, an extinction burst, which refers to a temporary increase in frequency, intensity, or duration of the behavior after reinforcement is removed. Mrs. Wen plans to reduce Liam's attention-seeking behavior by withholding attention is technically sound, but as expected, the behavior initially gets worse. Liam screams louder, escalates, and bangs and throws objects. And unpredictability worsens after the substitute inadvertently reinforces the behavior. Effective use of extinction requires proper planning for these effects, staff training, consistency, and often combining extinction with reinforcement for an alternative behavior. A is incorrect because spontaneous recovery is making screaming worse. Spontaneous recovery occurs after the behavior has decreased, often following a break or pause. Liam's behavior is not decreased yet. It is actively escalating due to extinction, not recovery. C is incorrect. Reinforcement is being delivered on a fixed interval, making behavior intermittent. There is no mention of a fixed interval or any kind of schedule of reinforcement. The plan involves withholding reinforcement, which defines extinction, not intermittent delivery. And D, Liam has become satiated on attention and is now engaging in automatic reinforcement. There's no indication that Liam is satiated or that the function of behavior has changed to automatic. The screaming is still decreased as attention seeking, and the escalation is due to lack of reinforcement or satiation. So what I'm going to tell you is when you probably read aggression, you probably thought physical aggression, but really, right, he's banging on the walls. What else did it say? He's throwing objects, right? So what you don't want to do, this is just a testing tip, is that when you read something like that, you inadvertently input your own mental definition of what that is. And just take the question at face value of like, this is what it's alluding to. Okay, that was your last question. So as always, you can find us at studynotesaba.com. If you have any questions, you can email contact@studynotesaba.com. You can follow us on Instagram at studynotesaba.com. You can follow Behavior Bitches Podcast. We have a TikTok, which is not on here, and you can follow us on Study Notes ABA on the TikTok and the YouTube. So please make sure you subscribe. So thank you for coming tonight. We love you. We mean it. I'm going to stop the recording.